Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. I think maybe we give another 30 seconds for people to join into the room, and then we'll get started. Oh, wow. Okay, thanks everybody for joining us today. To quickly this is actually the first time we do this setup, so we'd love to know afterwards how your experience with this setup was. But today we are talking about shifting careers, a career change and everything that goes along with it. And so I'm Nandini, I'm the Deputy CEO from Stashaway, and I have Yolanda Yu with me today, who is from Reperspective Coaching that she runs. So she is a career executive and team coach, and obviously advises people on things like this as her full-time job and as an expert. So we're super thrilled to have you today, Yolanda, with us. And we're gonna try to keep this very conversational, but hopefully, you will all be able to get something out of it, and hope it will be enjoyable for you along the way. But yes, on a Thursday evening before a long weekend, thank you so much for joining us at 7 p.m. We greatly appreciate your time today. So Yolanda, there is a lot that I could say about you, but I think just your own journey is so fantastic because shifting careers, what we are talking about today, I think you have lived it, I've lived it, and that's why actually both of us are very excited about coming together. So if you can share first a little bit about yourself, and then would be great to just have you tell us about your journey so far.
Sure. So thank you so much, Nandini. And it's really my honor to be here with, at Stashaway with you and with the audience. So a little bit about myself. I'm a career coach and leadership coach. Perhaps not so much on advice, but really to, accompany people on that journey, because I went through that a lot of times myself. In my 20 over years of experience, I went to 10 different jobs and 7 different directions. And that's where I think I really have done a lot of self-reflection and a lot of consideration of where am I going and where is the world heading as well. So I think, yeah, I think there's just a lot to share in terms of what I did that I think made sense and what I did that I wish I have done differently as well.
Yeah, and we really want to get into it because I think, in our pre-conversation earlier when we spoke about, obviously today as a coach, there is just so much that you are able to structure out of it. But I think what we also want to unpack a little bit in this conversation is what actually goes through people's mind when they are really into it, and everything might not be as structured as what you can unpack later on. So maybe Yolanda, would just love for you to start off with just sharing, where you started your own career journey, the changes that you made, and what brought you to where you are today as a coach.
Yeah. So I would broadly kind of split my career journey into 3. Actually, now I'm in the 4th phase. The first 3 phases, the first one, I started as a software, developer, a programmer. I used to do those Java, C# kind of stuff, right? If you still recognize with that, that reveals your
remember COBOL. If you remember COBOL.
Right. Yeah. And for me, I was so sort of intrigued by when my boss went to meet the clients and then come back and tell us what to implement. And I was like, what is happening in all those business rooms, right? In all those meetings. And I was just really wanting to get in there. And I love programming because it was, interesting, sort of intelligence wise. But at that time, I was just a lot more into business world. So I think my first phase of that transition was just really a jump to the other side. And also I had a lot of skill gap because I was quite introverted, which meant nothing but I didn't have a lot of practice in communication, or I didn't have any sales background. So it was pretty much about, I have a goal and I have gap, and then I leap forward to fill those gaps, and I got there. Right. So I wish, the later part of the career was like that, so straightforward. The second phase was very different. I was very lost as, I was already settled in the sales role. And then I jumped out to start my own HR startup because I was so connected to the HR software that I sold. And then later I went to a headhunting firm for a number of years, really just to broaden my horizon till the day I said, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's next. And what's next is a very powerful question, right? It's the moment we stop and pause and say, where am I? What's next?
Yeah.
So I think that's when I had my first career coach. And her advice after, hearing all my nonsense, she said, I think it's time for you to learn something else. And why not you consider MBA? And so I was fortunate to get into, the MBA school I wanted. And that's where I kind of continue to be in this widening phase where just opening horizon and looking at things that I never knew. And I think I was pretty glad that to find out that I was very fixed in my recruiter lens, and there were so many more different lenses that were available outside, the lens of recruiter. And the third phase was really identifying a focus. And I think a lot of it was also about where the world was going. And that was the year that Uber started in Singapore. I actually went to recruit with them and then decided not to join because I didn't like knocking on the taxi driver's window. Right? We literally did that at airport, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it was fun, but I said, I don't think I want to join.
I can imagine that.
And that year was also the year Lazada started, which I didn't know yet. And then I worked with a few startups to, at their phase of taking things off the ground. I felt like I was living the true realm of, technology, startup and everything. And I'm like, I'm going to go into startup world. That's where the world is heading. And that's where my energy is. So it felt very right at that point of time. Then I joined Lazada. And then I had a couple of different roles. And when somehow there was an opportunity given to me to be the CEO or the head for HelloPay, which is a very small startup, fintech startup at that point of time. And I was like, I knew nothing about fintech. I know nothing about financial services. So this might be, a good start to just learn what it is really about. So I joined. And then in half a year, Alibaba bought Lazada. Everything just came to a stop. Then I went to China. I had to, I learned a lot of things, and I came back and say, now I know where the world is going in the e-commerce world. It's a huge, massive ecosystem, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to focus on. And then I saw fintech was the biggest enabler within the e-commerce ecosystem. So that led to my later jobs at MasterCard and Visa. And I'll pause there. I won't talk about my, how I kind of consolidated everything into, coaching. And that's more like about the phase of self-search and all that. Just so we control the time a little.
No, and this is the thing, right? Like I think a lot of people think about career change or, even small changes in their career, maybe not even sometimes as big a change, but really struggle to think about a starting point of it. And one of the things that, Yolanda and I really bonded over in our previous conversations, because I started as a computer science engineer as well, and moved to the business side, and we went to the same business school later on. But as you said, right, like you had these three phases in your career, and how you thought about the shifts. If today you think about, like, to consolidate them into what are important strategies that you actually applied, and you actually think you would recommend to people to think with that framework of when they think about career change.
Yeah. So I think I pretty much still rely on these three strategies. In terms of, if you know your goal is very clear, then find all the opportunities to bridge the gap. So for me, it was like I just pushed myself to find any sales job, because I was not going to get sales experience until I get in, right?
Yeah.
So that was quite straightforward. But a lot of times, I think today we are in the second phase where we don't know what we don't know, and the world is in a big mess, right? And I think the most important part is actually to sort out more about where the world is heading in that phase, because I work with clients who I see one of the biggest barriers is they carry quite a bit of assumption about that place they aspire to go into, but then they are scared and say they won't look at my profile, and maybe there I'm going to work till I'm exhausted, and a lot of those hypotheses. So I think to be able to really map it out in a very clear way, to be able to learn more about the world is important. But I think the other thing is about learning about ourselves, right? If we are not sure, the world is going towards many directions at any point of time, right?
Yeah.
And it's for us. So let's say for me, when I was at Visa, I could choose to continue that corporate trajectory, or I could choose to do some NGO, which I felt extremely meaningful, or I could choose to reconnect with the HR or sort of coaching part of my passion. And there are so many ways I could do things. And it's important to return to myself to say, this is me.
What do you want out of it?
Yeah.
Right. And I know you and I talked a lot in this context about, people usually ask the question of, oh, how do I think about transferable skills? And I loved that you actually changed that word in our conversation, where you talked about skills transference, rather than thinking of it as transferable skills. How did you come to think about it, and how would you recommend, how would you suggest somebody to think about that, not as transferable skills, but that transference of skills?
Actually, I don't remember.
I had noted it down, and I was like, oh, I always think of it as transferable skills, but transference makes so much more sense. It's a subtle difference, I know, but it does, because to be honest, like when I was an engineer, and I thought, okay, this is not gonna be, my next 20 years. And I had to, a little bit, I knew where I didn't want to be, but I didn't know where I wanted to be. But I kind of knew what I enjoyed. I liked solving problems. I liked speaking to customers. And in fact, what I realized was I was always talking to them either via email or on the phone. And I wasn't actually getting to build more connection one-to-one or, in person. And then when I was trying to actually get a job in Louis Vuitton, coming from pure engineering, I literally had my entire CV just being about, I am great at solving people's problems, at customer problems. Where can I be in your company with that? And it was more around transferable skills, whereas, when we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, and that word transference for me was more about a value creation through that role, rather through that transfer, rather than, okay, where can I just apply myself? So I don't know, how do you think about that transferability of skills or transference of skills?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that experience. I think one thing you did was beautiful, was about you getting to the bottom of your skills, right? About solving problems for people, for customers, right? I think a lot of times when people look at their skill sets, they are defining it too specific to the context. So the context becomes, I've been working in this particular industry, and then I can solve this type of specific problem. And then when they try to take that to another industry, they start to feel like it's very, very hard to bridge, right? But what I think you just demonstrated beautifully is just get to the bottom, right? Whatever that context was, it's all about solving problems for, for people, for customers. And that can really transfer or transference, whatever value that in a very organic way. That's my take as one. Yeah. And sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
And I think what you just inspired me when you were talking about this word, it was landing on me with a different meaning at this moment. I think it's also about, we are seeing this whole skills or whatever experience we had in the past, having the potential to be emergent, to evolve into something different. It's like I am telling this company or this industry, I'm coming with all these things, which is not exactly what you are looking for. But you can see where it's going, and you can see how it can be shaped into something more specific into your context. And I think there's a lot of growth, a lot of hope there.
Yeah, and actually you remind me of a really, really good advice I had once got from somebody who actually I work with in she was the HR business partner when I was running a business unit, and she told me that if you have to switch industries, if you have to switch jobs, it's your job to help the other person visualize you in the role. You cannot leave it up to them. So to your point, right? Like when you think about how you move into another space and all, it's not the risk factor of somebody taking on, hiring somebody who doesn't have exactly that experience, hasn't done exactly that same thing before. You have to understand that they are adding a level of risk in their own mind. And I remember her saying that you have to think about how you write your CV, how you present your skill, how you have to do the work of helping them visualize you in that, and what is it that you will still solve for them. And I've given this advice further to people that, the way I was able to solve it for myself was by knowing how companies make money. If you do not know how companies actually make money, which means how their unit economics work, then it's going to be very hard for them to understand that you can actually add value no matter, even if you haven't been in this industry. And that's something that, has stuck with me for quite a while, because it was a way to help someone else visualize me in a role that I had never done before. But I also want, you went from an engineering to a sales job. And while we are trying to make those transitions happen, how do you actually prepare yourself for that success? How do you make sure that, you are taking a level of risk, there is uncertainty in it? How do you actually make sure that all of that is not going to hold you back and you actually put your best foot forward?
I think that is a great question. If I'm hearing you correctly, it's about, one is about courage and the other one is on my risk management, right?
Yeah, I agree. Courage is a big part of it, right?
So actually, I think one thing is also about knowing ourselves, right? And as I look back, I understood myself. I have an entrepreneur genes. To me, if I don't take risk, it's a bigger risk. So for me, it was actually pretty easy to, or maybe too easy to take risks. And I can easily, leave some of the very good company, very good job, and then say, I want to do something else. But it's very different when I work with some clients who are by nature very risk averse. And I respect that as well, because I think everyone has very different risk threshold, right? So when I work with those kind of clients, usually they might have, if they hold some assumptions about that industry is impossible, but I really want to go, but then it's impossible, then we can clear those thoughts or, the other assumptions on the risk. And to, so that they don't hold themselves back and they take the risk, the kind of risk that they feel comfortable with, and yet is a good stretch, but not like to the, to the extent that they are just like, I'm not comfortable.
Yeah, not paralyze yourself with
and
that
for some
risk.
people, they are not comfortable if they don't have $500,000 in the bank account, which is interesting, right? But on the other hand, when I meet clients like myself, sometimes I really want them to do a check, right? Because I know people like this tend to see too much of potential elsewhere than seeing, where we are. There are seeds of opportunities. And when I look back, I say, sometimes maybe I should have stayed put a bit longer. Yeah, and I think knowing self, knowing our tendency will help us to kind of regulate, and also knowing our risk appetite.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we know that, I mean, there is always a level of unknown that you are going to be walking into when you think about, that level of change. And I think some of the things that we also know, people usually, and especially women, tend to ask is how do you think about it in the context of a family? And, you have other responsibilities, and, women do tend to take the home responsibilities a lot more. How do you create the space still for yourself, whether that's through the self-reflection, as you said, but also conversation with, your significant other, with other important family members? How do you make sure that you are able to create that space for yourself to at least, be able to stretch to take that risk? Because there's not going to be a reward coming if there is no risk involved. So how would you think about that? Or where do people really find that challenging?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely spot on, like which is also kind of unfair that women tend to face this question a lot more, right? But that's part of the reality. Like men usually don't need to consult so much about taking risks. But I do hear men also, the two partners tend to take turns to take risk and say, okay, you've been taking risks, and then I've been taking a lower risk job, and now it's my turn to take risk. But then there are also couples who are just so comfortable and they both take risk and they are okay with that. So I think it's important to work it out together. In my case, it was actually not easy because I took a lot of risk in my whole career, and my husband was a lot more risk averse by nature as well. But then there were moments where he felt like, when will be my turn, right? So then I had to kind of convince him that this is not a risk because there are many other things that I'm doing, and then I am running a proper business and I'm, doing my stuff, right? It's not as risky as if I raise money or I borrow and on leverage. So I think that's also part of my understanding of my own risk threshold, that I'm comfortable. I find the risk of being a solopreneur quite comfortable, but I'm not yet comfortable taking a risk of, say, on lever or on, debt to put my own money into a big business. And that was actually a key factor when I came into my fourth phase of career, which I started to see there are a lot of things I don't have to go for. Like I can allow myself to live with my limitations and my own threshold and go for what I'm deeply connected with.
And so you shared, that your husband is more risk averse, whereas you are more comfortable with the risk. Actually, so is mine, which is good because I don't think I could handle two people taking risk in the family. But how do you make sure that, that still that balance remains, that, and I can imagine that a risk-averse person seeing someone so close to them take so much risk almost feels like the risk is on you as well, right? You can't separate out that risk so much from yourself in a family unit or in a couple. How do you make sure that it doesn't spill off in a place where it makes your partner so uncomfortable with the risk? Is it a communication thing? Is it something else? Because I've been trying to think about like how it works in my family.
I would like to actually hear also how you handle that. And I'm also still learning about that. I think for me, balance is constantly balancing, right? It's not balance. It's not set. But I think what helps is, really in general, looking at the numbers and knowing, the running numbers and how things would go in a worst case scenario and best case scenario. And it needs a lot of assurance to say, I can live with a different living standard if needed to. I can be at least covering my own expenses, and I might have to not cover part of the family expenses and the other person is able to. So I think that's where I am right now. And I would be, curious to learn how, what other options might be.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously, we talk a lot about money as a strong way to assure people and being prepared with that. And, we talk a lot about risk in how you manage your money, but risk is everywhere. You have to manage everything in your life through the risk. And I think, in the past, when I've had to take a big risk, once I had to ask my husband to quit his job and follow me to a different country, which was so outside of his risk profile. But I think I've always found personally that it's really important for it to not come as a surprise to your partner, and therefore, your aspirations, what you want to achieve, what risk you are willing to take for it, almost has to be a continuous conversation, so that the day that opportunity actually comes through, because I mean, personally, I found that, you try to create opportunities in your life, and and one day something does happen, and you have a fixed time to say yes to it, and that's what creates a career change or a massive shift, or you actually actively choose that you're not ready for it. And so I think that continuous conversation, so that when that opportunity actually arrives with the level of risk that it comes with, nobody is caught by surprise. And so everybody can recognize that this is what we have been preparing for, or we have been discussing, and now it's actually the time to execute on it. Not to say it still doesn't make people uncomfortable, or didn't make my husband uncomfortable, but it didn't stop us from saying yes to it. And similarly afterwards, I think at other times you might have to make a few sacrifices for it. Right now, for the last few years, the job that my husband wants to keep and make sure he keeps, because I keep on taking a different risk, it makes him be in a different country for a very long time. And that's a little bit of a sacrifice that, again, through discussions, you say, okay, if that's what we have to do, is that part of is that something that we will say yes to or not? So yeah, I think it just not being a surprise when it actually comes to, but I still think that there's so much nuance to preparation, but then actually doing it, which, you know, can always be uncomfortable still. And you don't have to deny that it's uncomfortable.
Totally, yeah. You know, when you were talking, I just saw two things. One is when we feel we are prepared, like we have been saving up, and this is the time to use it. It's so liberating. It's like it's prioritizing our personal growth and our, you know, opportunity to realize a lot of potential. And this is the saving for us to do that, right? And I think sometimes I really chance upon clients who have this but don't allow themselves to access it. And because it's like a saving is not to be touched. And it's interesting also because we are in an Asia culture, and then the economy, you know, moves all the time, and there are more and more sort of anxiety about I might lose my job, right? So with that, it sometimes feel even more difficult to actually touch that. But then actually that is for this, right?
That's your money working for you. That's what it's.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one. And I also think there are a lot of intangibles. So what happened with, for example, my case, right? And I told my husband, I really need to do this. I want to do this. I'm ready to do this. I have counted my money. Even if 6 years I have no income, I can live on it. Okay, I'm okay with that, right? And after I moved into the career I decided and designed for myself, and he started to say, oh, I think you're much happier. And I think that's intangible, right? Because sometimes if we hold back, there's a lot of risk there as well to say this is a person who's stressed out, who's not feeling fulfilled, and who is thinking, when can I jump out, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's one question that I had noted down because it's something that we get a lot, and I know I get a lot, and I never had a very clear answer. I was going more with the flow, but you and I both did, like, at some point of time, you know, after a bit of career, you also, as you shared, you went to MBA school to, you know, go back to school and invest in that. And you know, there are other times where you've created career shifts which have not been dependent on you going back to school for it, and you have relied on other strategies to make that career shift. How did you decide that going back to school and in this case doing an MBA was actually the right way to make, you know, make it happen for yourself, what you were trying to shift into?
My honest answer is I think I didn't know, you know, it was really where I was like, am I going to do this for my whole life? And what I was becoming really aware of was our, you know, our boss who drove McLaren, very rich guy, and he was telling all of, you know, the recruitment consultants like, hey, all of you must read Financial Times. And our job didn't really require that. I mean, even if you hire C-levels, you just, you know, here's the job, here's, you know, you don't need that. But then he made sure we do. And I was like, I don't understand.
I don't understand.
I don't understand. And what is this about? I tried, and then I said, I want to understand this. So, and I really wanted to understand more beyond our little world. And I think to me, even though I was not aiming to go into consulting, I was very clear I'm going to go back to commerce, and as in non-consulting, non-banking. But I was not clear where I was going to, but it was a huge risk that I took. But I think I always believe in the power of learning. And the moment you start to see different things, you can do different things, you will make different choices. And I think that was one of the most risky but most worthwhile investment. I'm not advertising for it yet, but I feel so. But having said that, I think a few of other organizations I went to were also great schools. Like I think Alibaba, I think Lazada, they were all great schools, but especially Alibaba, because when I went there, it was just like a whole mind-blowing world, and there's just that entire really rich ecosystem. So similarly, Visa and MasterCard as well. So I think if we tap on that school, right, we learn things. There are just so rich resources from all these platforms.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, going back to school is not a small decision to make because there's a fee obviously involved, and then you spend a lot of years paying back for that fees. But also, just taking yourself out of the working world, during that time, and then having to go back into it with a completely different set of goals can actually be intimidating enough. And especially, I love that you shared that you were, not gonna go back. You weren't looking at the consulting and the banking, so the commerce, and which was the same for me, because it was like, I'm going to go back into the industry, not into consulting and into banking, which when you come out of an MBA school, there's not as clear path as it is for the people who come in saying, I'm going to go into consulting and I'm going to go into banking, because for them, the interviews are lined up. Everybody comes to the campus. You do your interviews. All you have to do is end up at the top of the charts and you'll have a job without ever leaving the campus. And I think a lot of people who have to, whose ambition is to go back into the industry and not into the consulting and banking, actually have to do a lot of soul searching and a lot of finding the path, even if they are coming out of a strong school, reputable school. It's not as straightforward.
Yeah, I would definitely think it's quite a hard path, right? So it is a lot of risk. And so sometimes when people say, should I go for MBA? And then I would actually see, what's your biggest opportunity cost? And if you have a wonderful school, right, and an organization as a school, then yeah, that's what
then
you
think
may lose.
twice about it, right?
Maybe not the right timing.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it also, depends on what you have as skill set today. What are the skill sets that you are trying to acquire, get a leg up? What is the best way if your current place is not the school for those skill sets? Like, I was an engineer and I wanted to go completely different, be in commerce, in like actually sales and stuff. And I was like, I'm gonna have to change my space drastically. All I know is physics and math, and I had never done a single class of business or economics or accounting or anything like that. So yeah, not exactly. I saw the other people at school at my MBA school actually struggle a lot less through that, just because they came also with skill sets from their previous roles that were probably broader. And I think my own skill set and my work till then, even though I had 3+ years of experience before I went to business school, my skill set was very narrow. It was problem solving, but it was problem solving in completely in the engineering world. So that can feel very, very narrow for people. I see that we have quite a few questions actually coming in. So if you don't mind, I'll start to pick those up. Sure. Because I want to do justice to them. So maybe let me start. We have Annabelle who's saying, amazing to listen. Thank you so much, Annabelle, that you're enjoying. Her question is, how do you get this? I got offered this leadership role opportunity that you mentioned. What would be your advice to be able to have a chance to join a leadership team lead role? Do you want to start?
What's that? Leadership role?
I got offered this leadership role. I'm trying to think, when did we mention I got offered this leadership role?
You meant your current role?
If talking about my current role, this is my 4th leadership role, so not just this. But maybe we'll try to answer, Annabelle, your question on how do you get a chance to join a leadership and a team lead role. Do you want to start first?
Sure, I'll start first and please jump in. How I always observe a trend that most people underestimate their past experience. So even if you have never been in an official leadership role, I think in today's organization, you would have had a lot of unofficial leadership moments or projects, or it's just how you would influence people, or even if, pulling things together. And to be able to recognize that, name that, and talk about that would already help you to, to show a different side of yourself, and both in the CV and interviews. So I'll stop there for now.
I'll maybe share something to add on to that on a different tone. So I something that Obama had once said in his interview that had really, really resonated well with me. And I had this conversation with another friend of mine who is in an incredible leadership role. And he said, there are a lot of intelligent people who are very good at telling you very intelligently what the problem is, but not at solving the problem. And personally, I've always found, and the reason why that resonated a lot with me is because for me, team lead leadership at whatever level, whether it's your first team lead role and you are guiding people in technical skill sets, or, it's a leadership role where you have to actually build bigger strategies or whatever it may be, it has to start from the place of what is the problem that I will solve rather than intelligently frame what the problem is. And at any level that you can demonstrate that, even in the smallest way, I promise you it will be seen. People see problem solvers. So think about, getting into your team lead role as just thinking about, as Yolanda also said, you have probably been experiencing it in small ways, in other ways. In a business context, I would really say, think about not being the intelligent person, intelligently framing a problem, but actually solving it. And for me, that's what people will bet on you for, because you will just solve their problems rather than tell them what the problem is.
Yeah, and I feel like I think that's so true, and I feel like layering up on that a little is also being able to see what is the problem.
Yeah.
I feel like if for example people in the certain level, when looking at JD, we kind of get a bit tunneled and see, okay, this is the job to get this, but why? Why does the organization need this job, and what is the organization trying to do? What is the organization facing, right? Is there a very strong competitor, or a very unfriendly government regulation, or what is the market condition? And that would be the problem of this entire jobs context. And I think getting to that problem really demonstrates your leadership quality, that you are not only a doer, but you are also able to understand the big picture.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, I'll go to the next question. Could you please help share what was your thought process when it comes to personal financial planning during a career switch, especially if one cannot yet predict revenue income for the next gig, such as from a full-time job to being an entrepreneur academic route? Okay, I'll start first. I think from a financial planning perspective, when you take risk and you want to make the career switch, there are two parts, right? Here you're asking really in the context of an entrepreneur side, so I'll talk more about that. I think you need to really think about what time frame it will take for you to make whatever you want to step into successful. And you have to be liberal with that time frame rather than trying to really think about the minimum time frame. Because, being successful in a new thing is going to take time. You want to have space for creativity, iteration, whatever you want to, call it. And so, if if saving and putting things aside for the unknown is not already in your nature, I would already recommend to start from there. It's just to actually say that this is cushion that you start to build, but when you actually want to take a level of risk, prepare very consciously for the time frame of that risk, but also tell yourself, if that risk does not pan out, what will you do? From will you need money then immediately? Do you have to actually make some choices in your spending habits or in your cost of living? But think of it as choices across your day, your life, and not just about a number in your bank account, because it can actually help you get to that planning faster or to your goal faster, because needs and wants can be very different. Personally, when I went to the first startup that I worked with, I actually took a massive pay cut, like close to 70%. This was like 10 years ago. And yes, one thing was, my husband was working. And so we said, okay, we have to make sure that we can live within 80% of his salary, because I was taking a massive pay cut. And so we changed house. We said our rent needs to decrease. We have to make this choice. We moved houses. And I knew, okay, this might be for 6 months, but I also knew that I didn't want to have that strict timeline that if, this doesn't work out in 6 months, I have to go back to the corporate job that I had before. And so to create that space, we said, we're going to bring down our expenses, and we moved houses. So I think, and if if you don't have a second salary in the household, and if you have to rely on entirely on your own saving, then obviously, I would say, think about exactly your needs and wants before carefully, because, what is going to make you happy is changing in a definition over that year. And I think recognizing it can make it easier for you to get there.
Wow. I really applaud that, the needs and the wants. And also, I think I'm hearing that, that courage to let go, that takes a lot of strength in the character to say, I can downgrade my house, right? And I think sometimes it just feels so hard for us to let go a salary, to let go, even for some women who want to, who's, I think, contemplating entrepreneurship. It's also very hard to let go the self-image of being a professional woman, and may feel like, am I falling into a housewife because I don't have an income, right? So to be able to let go of the things beyond what we actually need financially and what real career goal we want to pursue in life, and let go of the rest,
I mean, I think focusing on the joy that is going to come from the choice that you are making is what, I would recommend should drive you forward, rather than what you are having to leave behind. Okay, next question is, could you share advice for a fresh graduate who is new at navigating their career? Should they think about finding jobs in their field of study? I think you and I both went, first jobs were field of study, but afterwards wasn't.
I don't know. I actually see more people who are not in a field of study after a while, or even after when they graduate, right? I think it was easier for me I didn't want to work as a programmer, but it was the easiest. So I went in and then I changed. I think a lot of people, I think I've seen some research before, like majority of people or some percentage don't end up working in their, original field of study anyway. And I think that should not be in your top consideration, but rather, what are the things you can transfer, right? What have you learned? Like, I know people who study psychology, but then now the person is in a very different field. He's actually a CEO, by the way. I don't know. I'm not very sure what transferred, but perhaps it helps him to understand humans, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I would say, your field of study at university is about you broadening your knowledge on a topic. Most jobs actually are not direct application, unless, yes, if you're going to be a civil engineer, you have to have studied engineering and or medicine or, technical skill set like that, obviously. But, if we think about most of the business related functions and all, there is not that much correlation directly with field of study. Most first jobs are really about, I would say, analytical skills, one, which you don't have to go through it via field of study. I think analytical skills gets you very far in getting into a good job and actually doing well in a different field from what you studied in. Um, the second one is just being curious about, what job you want to go into, what is the industry, trying to get to know more about the industry. So curiosity of, building a bit of peripheral vision goes a long way to not keeping you tight just in your field of study. And then the third is communication skills. I think people really, really undervalue good communication skills. And if you have if you can focus a little bit on building analytical skills, understanding the industry that you're going to go in and layer that with communication skills, you don't need to feel that limited about your field of study and where you go for a job. I cannot imagine so many, there's just so many things that today you can study that don't, so many jobs also that don't have direct, university degrees.
Yeah, and I think what we study usually quickly get obsolete.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
But I think just in addition to the communication skills, so I do a lot of work with people, leaders on communication skills. Usually it goes back to how we think. Right. So if our mind is focusing on, let's say, all details, what we produce is going to be all details. Right. If our mind is going all over, then we are not going to sound very focused, right? So just like when you talk about problems, if our mind is obsessed with problems, we won't be a problem solver. So I think end of the day, it's also about training ourselves to understand the world in more accurate. I don't know if we can ever get so accurate, but really continue to be curious, like Nandini said. And keep learning about the world, because the university, the school doesn't end there.
Yeah. And not everything can prepare you direct, believe me. Yeah. Okay. Another question is, could you please share your thoughts on pursuing postgraduate studies, so MBA or other master program, as a stepping stone for career change in this current environment where employers are more open to hiring based on skills instead of academic qualifications? Is it possible to successfully pivot without additional postgraduate studies? I think it definitely is possible to pivot, also because you just have so many other options to learn something today, rather than having to take yourself into a school environment for a full year. Personally, I would, I'll speak a little bit more specific about an MBA, which I feel is different from, if you are doing a master's in even, in marketing, or if you're doing master's in any other more targeted field of study, which I haven't done in the past. But for me, an MBA was so much about, as Yolanda, you shared earlier, was just about opening your world. I met people at my MBA, and they had jobs that I had just never thought these were jobs out there in the world, because I was a science major. I went to do computer science. I studied, physics as a minor, and then I went and did an engineering job, and I worked in a building with 350 other engineers. There wasn't enough diversity in the beginning in my life. And so the MBA for me was, just such a massive eye opener of what was possible and how much you could learn in a year. So I think if you are in a place where you are just trying to completely open up your world, I would still wholeheartedly recommend an MBA to somebody. But obviously, if you're trying to become a bigger expert in something and your career pivot is dependent on that, then I think I think you can still look at what are other new options that are available today, which don't require you to, completely go back to school.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with what Nandini said. And I think also to the anecdote about today, we are, in an economy that is not so positive, and a lot of companies are indeed,
Yeah.
I think that should be an important consideration as well, that is this the right timing? Would you want to watch and see how things are? And also depending on, let's say, if you go into an MBA school and aiming to change your industry, when things don't go well, do you actually have a fallback plan to go back to your current industry and still get recognized?
Yeah.
And I think being able to see that kind of plan B would be very helpful as well.
Yeah, agree. Okay, we have a lot of questions coming in.
We have 4 more minutes.
Does your job have to be your passion? I will answer it no. Today, my job is my passion. I've done jobs which were not my passion, but I appreciated things in it. I think you have to appreciate something in your job. I think passion for me, I define passion very differently. I'm also a little bit more pragmatic person. So, after 22 years of working, yes, I do now, in the last maybe 5 to 7 years, I have combined, that word job and passion together. But for a long time, I did not, but I did appreciate things in my job and what I was doing, and I saw value in it. Wouldn't particularly call it passion. What do you think?
This a very, this sounds like a great space to be. I kind of admire that because I didn't naturally come from that place. I was this, starry-eyed person and say, I'm going to find a place where I have passion, and then every day I live my dream. It's not the case. I'm not boasting that, but because you see, there's something I really love to do. I really love to work with a lot of my clients, and I love to share things. But then, for example, I have started running my weekly newsletter, which is really cracking me. And every day, every time when I finish writing that, I'm like, I'm so dead, I'm so drained. Do I love it? I think I still have enough passion and meaning because with, the people I'm sharing with, there is very beautiful interaction and connection. But then on the other hand, do I love, crunching words
out for the day?
For the day? And I think every job is like that, right? There's moments we are like at the top of that joy,
Yeah.
right? When I hear someone has secured an offer, someone has made a significant shift. But when I have to do certain things, I have to do it. And that's what it is, right? That's the whole package.
Great. How do I know if it's the right time to make a career change? Oh my God, we have so many questions, and
is there a
vote? Time?
Is there a vote function?
Unfortunately not. So how do you know if it's the right time to make a career change?
When you will regret if you don't. That's what happened to me when I was really unable to let go of my well-paid corporate job and good career potential. One day I said, if I fall down on like the plane I was taking, if it crashed, well, I regret that I never tried. And then I said, yes, I will regret. So let's do it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the right time. I think you have to know when when it makes sense, in the sense that there is more that is positive for you to get out of taking that risk, out of making that jump, than staying where you are. So personally, I don't think there was ever like a single moment where I said, now is the time to make a career change. But at some point of time, you just realize, oh, there is an option in front of you that just clicks. And there is a bigger reason to say yes to it. And actually no reason, very little or no reason to say no to it. And then you jump.
Yeah, and that's called intuition, right?
Yeah.
Like to be able to trust intuition sometimes is really important.
Should I accept a pay cut when changing career paths? How can I negotiate? Oh, I feel this is a loaded question. Look, I have taken pay cuts, but I have not taken pay cuts in an entirety. I would say compensation structures can change, and I have accepted compensation structure changes rather than really calling it a pay cut. So, cash component may have moved, but there are other things, stock options and all that have made sense of why you wanna, re-examine or say yes to a different structure. I think it's a very hard thing to say whether to accept a pay cut. I think a lot has to be about what are you trying to shift? What is the value that you still bring? And what is the value to you of it, right? I don't know how you feel. I find it very hard to answer this question.
Yeah, I think there's no should or not. There is actually about that question is to yourself. Which point would you take the job, and at which point you would walk away, right, from the job? And knowing that bottom line, it will help you when you enter that negotiation process, not to walk in and say, I want minimum this amount, but to say, I ideally want to benchmark with my last pay and ideally higher because that's what I think is market price. However, I'm open to a structural, change, right? Or for whatever reason, because it's a startup, they give you higher on, equity, or there's other reasons just because the market is bad. Right now, I've heard a lot of offers that are at a pay cut, unfortunately, at this moment, because there are just a lot of layoff and the general sentiment is not that high. So when that happens, I think walking in, knowing our own bottom line, at what amount I'm going to walk away if they don't give me. And I think the answer will be a lot simpler.
I think maybe I'll leave with this one. The pay cut should not come at you feeling undervalued. I think that's where I would say it doesn't work. So for whatever reason, a pay cut is in front of you, or it's a choice you have to make. If it is making you feel undervalued, then probably is not going to put you in a condition of success. Whatever is the other structure around it, or even if it is a pure pay cut, but you still feel that that is going to bring value, and every morning you're going to be happy about the decision that you have made and what else it is bringing to you, then sure, that can be part of the equation in your decision making, but obviously not to feel that you're just in the wrong place for it.
Yeah, and you can totally bring that out to the hiring manager and say, if I accept this, I'm really going to feel, not so comfortable. And you can always ask for something else that maybe comes for you as a benefit, but not a cost for the company. And sometimes I've seen very creative solutions of people asking to be, based in a different country, at least on the title, and all that to save some of the cost for the company, and then to also make sense for themselves. So I think we don't need to just look at, it's a salary pay cut, but also overall, how can we both get more value out of this employment agreement?
Yeah. I know we still have a lot of questions we could not get to, and thank you so much, for taking so much time with us. We're gonna make sure that we answer these questions to you in our post-event email. I think my colleague Yanjie is sitting over here, and we'll find a solution for it for you. I promise we want to at least make sure that we help you as much as possible on this topic, but we are running over time. First of all, thank you so much, Yolanda, for joining today. This was super fun for me. I really hope for you and for everybody else. But thanks so much for sharing so openly, and also for just letting me keep this very free flow. There's so much today that we did not prep for.
I'm enjoying so much. Like I don't know. I think there's your energy and also the audience here, and I feel like
this is
yeah.
I love this. So if you want to stay in touch with Yolanda, she has a website, yolandayu.com. Also, you can follow her on LinkedIn. My colleague Yenji is also showing 2 QR codes right now up. We would love to get feedback. Like I said, this is the first time we are trying to do it this way, trying to bring topics that we know are part of wealth creation. They may not have anything to do with managing your money today, but we know that's what, most women actually do have to go through as a larger wealth creation journey. So we want to make sure that we are helpful over here and we bring you the right topic. So please do take 2 minutes to fill up the feedback form. If you can, that would be very helpful for us. And obviously, we have a little bit of a free investing offer for you. So do utilize it if you do want to put your money to good use soon. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you so much, Yolanda, and I look forward to our next She Invest sessions. Thanks a lot. Have a nice evening.
Have a nice evening. Thank you for being here.